You know what time it is, everybody? It's time for another episode of Mondays in Middle Earth. Welcome aboard. I'm Tim Anderson, aka Renfail, sometimes known as the Bearded Dwarven Princess, here in my Rings of Power videos. I just woke up from a nap. My Mando mug of coffee. Whew. Air conditioner's on. We're good to go. No rainstorms at the moment, but look at it clouding up outside, which means it's a perfect day for reading. Meantime, we are back. We are currently reading through The Two Towers, and we are doing Chapter 10, The Voice of Saruman, in today's episode. If you've not watched the previous episodes, don't forget to dive back into them at your leisure. And of course, don't forget to check out Discord down below. We have a section of Discord set up for those of you who want to have greater discussions about Lord of the Rings. We do these every Monday at 11 a.m. Central, so hopefully you enjoy. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get starting. Started? Yeah. So this chapter picks up right where we left off the previous one. Basically, previous chapter was Merry and Pippin recounting everything with Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas. There's lots of pipe smoking. That's up reminiscing. And then we get up to the point where, oh, we need to go check on Theoden and Gandalf and Treebeard. What's going on? So um, we start the chapter off here with everyone wondering whether or not Saruman is still dangerous or not. And if you remember from the previous chapter, Pippin makes this joke, and I can't remember, is it Legolas or Aragorn? I think it's Aragorn. I don't remember actually who it was now. Somebody pipes up and says, "Don't be fooled. There are very few people in the world who could stand up to the might of Saruman." Mainly Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel are like the other wizards of the Circle, or the other Council, I should say. But he's still very dangerous. So this chapter starts off with people kind of wondering that still, and Gandalf reminds them that there is no knowing what he can do or may choose to try, and that a wild beast cornered is not safe to approach. Saruman has powers you do not guess, and you should beware of his voice. So that's very important for what comes next, because I think we're kind of given a rare glimpse here into, everybody has sort of their own little unique power, and Saruman's is on full display here, even though he's weakened and defeated at this point, basically. But we get this description here then of the power of Saruman's voice. It says it's a delight to hear, and all that it said seemed wise and reasonable. And when they spoke to one another, they smiled as men do who see through a juggler's trick while others gape at it. So it's like when he's talking to you, you feel as though it's making sense to you, and everyone else around you is stupid, and you're the only person in the room that matters. And it very much, the power of the voice draws you in, and it's hypnotism essentially. Um, but when they get up to the tower, it's this whole sequence where Saruman is trying very hard. He's using his voice to try to sway the group that's in front of them. He cracks a couple of times. It's really interesting how this is written. It says, twice Saruman calls out for Theoden King to answer him, but the king is silent until finally Éomer speaks up. And he says that he's basically referring to Saruman here. He talks about how Saruman's an old liar with honey on his forked tongue. And this is when Saruman starts to snap, because he does very quickly snarkily reply back, "If we speak of poisoned tongues, then what shall we see of yours, young serpent?" It's just it's not positive you don't understand until maybe you become king one day. So he insults Éomer here about how, don't put your nose where it doesn't belong, you young pup. Get back in place. You're not a king yet. You needed to just back off a little bit. But as the conversation goes on and Saruman is speaking to them and trying to woo them, Theoden finally finds the strength to reply. And it says that as he does so, he struggles. His words come thick. He's also, in my mind, he's also struggling against the fact that he was under Saruman's enchantment for so long. So he's finding it very difficult to face this individual. But when he finally does, he says, yes, we are going to have peace, right? We are going to have peace when you and all your works have perished, and the works of your dark master to whom you would deliver us. You are a liar, Saruman, and a corrupter of men's hearts. When you hang from a gibbet to your window for the sport of your own crows, I will have peace with you. Oh, You may think of me a lesser son of greater sires, but I am. But I do not need to lick your fingers. I fear your voice has lost its charm. This is such an amazing section because it's Theoden bringing his own fears up and saying, "I am the lesser son of great sires, but I can resist you. So when you hanging from the gibbet at the sport of your own crows, that's when we can have peace." Man, this is a big middle finger to Saruman right here. It's really amazing. I fear your voice has lost its charm. And this is said, it says here, the men of Rohan's gaze, basically, it was like they're startled from a dream because uh, Theoden's voice, as he speaks, was harsh as old ravens after the music of Saruman's voice. So everyone was starting to fall under Saruman's spell here. Like, even in defeat, even weakened, he is strong enough. The will of his voice is able to carry, and it's wooing the crowds and think of how easy it must have been for him to convince the men of Dunland, who were lesser minds, so to speak, just hill folks, tribe folk. They're not educated men and women. They were just people, simple folk, farm folk, living in caves. And it would have been very easy for him to manipulate them and to go into war. Because he did. He convinced them. If you remember one of the previous chapters, when the men of Rohan, after Helm's Deep, they put the people to work. They put the Dunleavys to work in repairing everything they had hurt, and just said, "We'll let you leave, but you have to make a pact never to cross the Isen ever again, and never raise arms against us." And they said they were surprised because Saruman had convinced them that the men of Rohan burned them alive and burned their captives, and you know, Saruman's voice is very powerful. This is when Saruman starts to really get pissed. "Gibbets and crows," he hisses, and everyone shudders at the change as rage overcomes the wizard. He then insults Theoden and calls him a dotard. What is the house of Earl but a thatched barn where brigands drink in the reek and their brats roll on the floor among the dogs? Just not a nice guy right now. He's obviously pissed. He then tries a last ditch effort to sway Gandalf of all people. Gandalf, of course, is unmoved. Um, and basically tells Saruman, "What do you have to say now that you didn't say in our last meeting? Or perhaps you have things to unsay." Offering Saruman an out. He's offering Saruman a chance to repent. Even after all Saruman has done, Gandalf is offering him a chance to atone for his actions. But this is the last. This is it. This is the breaking of things. Saruman attempts one last speech, and the text actually says, so great was the power that Saruman exerted in this last effort that none that stood within hearing were unmoved. But Gandalf merely laughed, and the fantasy vanished like a puff of smoke. And then Gandalf tells him that he missed his path in life and would have been better as the king's jester, earning his bread and stripes by mimicking his counselors. And then tells Saruman, "I fear I am beyond your comprehension, but I understand you now all too well." And then it says here that we get a glimpse of Saruman for a brief second before he could conceal it. He said, "We get a glimpse through the mask of anguish, a mind in doubt, loathing to stay, and yet dreading to leave his refuge. But then pride and hate conquered, and the mask is back on." Um, so he did have a brief moment of saying, "Oh no, I effed up," but his pride and hate got in the way, and we get to the next part here. Gandalf then tells him, "You can leave of your own free will if you will simply hand over the keys to Orthanc and your staff." At which Saruman laughs at him with this line of dialogue and says, "Yeah, right. I'm going to give you the keys and my staff. Yeah, and you're going to give them back to me later after I've reformed. Uh-huh, yeah, right. And after that, you're going to want the crown of the seven kings and the rods of the five wizards. Maybe you'll get yourself a pair of boots many times larger than the ones you wear now." And he attempts to walk away after insulting Gandalf, and Gandalf literally says, "No, come back, Saruman. I'm not done with you." And Saruman, it says, to the amazement of others, Saruman turns around and drags himself back as if dragged against his will, and leans against the rail, breathing hard, with his hand clutching his black staff like a claw. So in this case, Saruman is utterly defeated at this point. He's lost all his power, and Gandalf's will is compelling him at this point, which is really amazing to see. Um, Gandalf's like, I did not give you leave to go, and I have not finished. For behold, I am not Gandalf the Grey. I am Gandalf the White, who has returned from death. You have no color now, and I cast you out from the Order and from the Council, and your staff is broken. So, this is a scene that was somewhat attempted in the film, but it wasn't. Visually, it looked really cool when Saruman's staff broke in the film. This is also when the Palantir comes crashing down from above, and this is where they actually, as they're going down the stairs, they leave Saruman to himself. He still has the keys, but his staff is broken. He's been cast out from the council. Um, they leave Saruman to his ways, and Gandalf actually talks to the Ents, and the Ents promise to watch Saruman until whatever end he comes to. And Gandalf picks up the Palantir. There's a brief moment where you see Pippin start to pick it up, and he's distracted by it, but Gandalf's like, "I'll take that," and picks it up. But that's where this chapter ends. Now, I had thought this was the end of I thought this was the end of book 3, but apparently there's one more chapter, was the chapter about the Palantir, which we're going to be getting to next week. But I love this chapter because it gives a glimpse into the fact that Saruman at one point in time was the head of the Order and considered the most wise among them, and just in his pride and arrogance became corrupted, but even at the end, Gandalf is willing to let him repent, and he chooses not to. And then Gandalf says, well, fine, be that way, I'm going to take your staff. You're done, cast you out. Great chapter, love it. Don't forget, if you want to read more of these with me every Monday at 11 a.m. Central, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, drop a super thanks if you want, and I'll see everybody next week. Leave your comments below. Happy reading, everybody.